Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
And make this full screen again.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar on high-impact family engagement strategies. We're talking about promoting equity for student success. This is the third in a series of webinars sponsored by the Connecticut State Department of Education. And I'm Judy Carson. I work in School Family Community Partnerships in the Department of Education. Today we're going to be continuing a discussion about our definition of family engagement and high impact practices. And we're going to be specifically looking at front office staff in a welcoming school. And we have some guests joining us from Danbury Public Schools to share their work with us. And they're going to focus on shifting expectations, and then we'll finish off by talking about some ideas to get started. So I'm really excited that we're doing this webinar today. I think this issue of front office staff and also our security staff and a number of our other associated partners in school have been overlooked in the work we do to build school-family partnerships. And we're going to dig into that today. So if you've joined us on previous webinars, you've heard us talking about a new definition in Connecticut that we are rolling out around family engagement. After a number of focus groups and work with stakeholders, the definition that came forward is on your screen. We talk about family engagement as a full, equal, and equitable partnership among families, educators, and you'll see that I've added today school staff. In our original draft, I think this was overlooked. So I'm really humbled and excited that we're here to have this conversation and put a focus on the important other partners in our schools. If you didn't join us for webinar number 1, that is archived, and we'll tell you later how to get to that. Our guest was Ann Henderson, who's a national expert in family engagement. We talked about family engagement as a full and equal partnership. Homes and schools have very important roles to play, equally important roles, but different roles with different expertise. We also talked about equity and the notion that families and students are individuals, and we need to individualize our approach, our process, our strategies to meet all of the families, all of the students where they are. So please take a look at our first webinar for more discussion on that and some downloadable tools that schools can use. So one of the strategies we've talked some about in the second webinar was this idea of creating a welcoming school. And that is a strategy that is backed by evidence. What you're seeing on the slide right now is a snippet from new guides that have just come out from the State Department of Education. We've produced evidence-based guides for districts to use when they're looking at spending their funds and planning their programs. And there's a link at the bottom of that slide. You can go on the State Department of Education's website and see these brand new guides where we've brought together the best research evidence in a number of different areas, including curriculum areas, student support areas, and family and community engagement. And so in the Family and Community Engagement Guide, there's quite a number of strategies. The one we're honing in on right now is digging deeper into the idea of creating a welcoming school. And this is a piece of research that's been replicated and well understood in the field, that a welcoming environment is one of the most influential indicators for family engagement. And not only is that research backed, but it makes intuitive sense. In order to build partnerships, people need to feel welcome at the table, welcome to come into the door, welcome to have a conversation. That really is the fertile soil where all the other strategies grow. Before we can work with families on linking to learning and understanding curriculum and assessment, we need to develop that relationship. And that relationship starts with the idea of feeling wanted and feeling welcome to be there. In preparing for today, I did a little bit of looking into the research on the studies of front office staff and the role that they play in school-family partnerships. And not surprisingly, I think, is there's not a lot of research out there. And the research that is out there confirms that this has been a forgotten partner in the work we try to do to build the bridge between home and school. And I like this quote very much from the article, and the title of the article is Invisible Labor. It says the front office sits in the hyphen written between home-school and between teacher-parent relations. And when we think about all the communication that goes back and forth from home to school, there's a lot that goes through the front office. And if we haven't enlisted those folks as our partners, if we haven't brought them into the discussion, and if we haven't also listened to their perspective, we are missing that link between home and school. We can strengthen that link and make these relationships even stronger and even better supports for students. So what I want to do is show you a quick video. This is from Highline Public Schools, which is in the state of Washington, and it's just a snippet of a front office in action and perspectives from families on how they feel in this front office. So you can see in that short video, am I on?
You're on. It's not showing the slide.
Okay, we're going to fix this quickly. You can send a shout out to my partner, Tom Sullivan, who's helping me with the technology here. You can see in that quick video the important role that the office plays from the perspective of the families. And these are things, if you're a parent and you've been to your own child's school, you recognize as so important. The eye contact, knowing my child's name, and being able, in many cases, to work with different cultures, work with different languages. So this next slide is from that study I mentioned earlier. So let's see from the perspective of the staff working in the office, what's it like? Well, I just clipped a few of the bullets that these researchers found when they went and spent some time with folks doing this work. And as you can see, in addition to answering the phones and welcoming people as they come in, just a huge list of tasks that are going on in that office, in addition to collecting money, keeping the principal or school leader on track. You may not be able to read all these bullets, but even things like, and these were actual instances that the researchers recorded, dealing with two parents fighting in the yard and dealing with the mother's boyfriend coming in to fight with the father. So all kinds of things happen in our front offices. Yet the expectation is the staff not only juggles all of these tasks, but remains calm in all circumstances, is highly organized, flexible, and responsive. So this really is a tall order and a very important role central to the life of our schools. One of the things that comes out of this work of studying, talking to people in this role, is that they have a ton of responsibility, but they really don't have a lot of say. They found that the front office is characterized by responsibility but little power, and often staff are expected to meet and communicate with school, district, and central office policy decisions over which they had almost no say. This, of course, often puts them in the role of difficult transactions with members of the public, including parents, because they're the interpreters of those policies. In addition, folks in this role often have very few training opportunities. Something called the intensification of work happens, and that means if you're good at something, you get more of it. So these offices then get more and more piled on, and oftentimes low pay. So we see a very important role that may not be as supported as it could be, and may not be joined into the work of building school-family partnerships in the way that it should, in order to make these people truly partners in the work we're doing. There are many schools and districts that are shifting this, paying a great deal of attention to this incredible resource that we have in these folks, and I'm thrilled that we're able to welcome people from Danbury Public Schools to talk about the work they've been doing. We have with us Ann Mead, who's the Director of School Family Partnerships in Danbury, and also Estella Camacho, who's the Director of the Morris Street Family Resource Center. And they're going to talk about the work that they've been doing in Danbury schools.
Good morning, Judy.
I can't hear.
Good morning.
Goodness.
Oh, good. Oh, there you are. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? We're glad to join you from Danbury this morning.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yes.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. And in the title of this webinar, I did steal some of your terrific language, making off the front office the family-friendly first impression, and talking about the directors of first impression in our schools, and some of the ways that you have just recharacterized this work and modernized it for the important work we're trying to do to build partnerships with families.
Great. Great. So Judy, I want to give a little bit of context here of why we had to think differently in Danbury. And as our team here in Danbury looked at how to create welcoming schools, we realized that there were some barriers right up front that we had to deal with. in the day and age that we live in now, we realized that the security systems that were put into place became barriers for parents. They are brought to a school or come to a school to register their child or to meet with the child's teacher, and the first thing they come about is that lovely buzzer. Ring the buzzer and someone will let them in. Well, if they don't read English and it's only written in English to ring the buzzer, or to once they come into the school, if there's only someone that speaks English to them, it is another barrier for families to really be able to come in and feel safe and welcome in our schools. And so as a team, we worked on how can we do this better? How can we have people at that front welcoming part of the schools that make parents feel safe and welcome when they first get here? And so we realized we had to do a couple things. One was to look at who are those people that are welcoming our families into our schools, and how we're moving families with their first introduction into our schools. And so we have been lucky to do some fairly major training with our secretaries on what is a welcoming school and giving them resources to be able to communicate with all parents. We also realized that our safety advocates play a major role in this. And for the safety advocates, sometimes they are the first people that families see when they first come in. And so with research, it shows that in the first 15 seconds, all impressions are made of what families think of your school. So that person becomes integral to that welcoming school. Here in my building, the Danbury Family and Community Engagement Center for Danbury Public Schools, it is a one-stop shopping of school registration, our free and reduced lunches in this building. Our before and after school programs are here, our summer programs, and our family learning center that really works at getting parents to come to play groups and to participate in activities with their children birth to age 5 and getting them ready for school. We also run a preschool here. And so when we went back to who we were going to hire as our security guard, we looked for someone who was well-versed in another language. And so our first security guard, or first security person, Rick, came with a wealth of knowledge of families as well as speaks Spanish. Our security person that we have now, Tony, also speaks Spanish. Right behind that person sits my right hand, Tatiana, that speaks Portuguese. So she's able to quickly jump to that front door if someone needs language in Portuguese. We have also instituted CTS language systems in all of our schools. And what that is, if a parent comes in and there's no one that speaks that language, the secretary is able to punch in a code into her phone and bring up a live interpreter right there to speak to that parent. We also have that where someone can call a parent and use that interpretation system or that interpreter to be able to speak to that parent. So that has really broken down some barriers. But if I can go back to that director of first impressions, and that's what we call our person at the front door, we really went through some major mindset changes of how we view our parents. And so we moved from that family partnerships are invisible to take meetings to where families are. So we do two things in this building. One, many families come to us because they now know it's the place to register, but we also are out in the community at events, running events in the parks where we're out there talking to families about what we do. And I'd like to have Estella, who's with me here today, talk a little bit about her play groups and how she reaches out to some of our families.
Hi, good morning. So definitely there's a lot, we do a lot with building connections with families of children of all ages. So anywhere from, those families that have a newborn child, we encourage them to come to the play groups and, learn about child development. And as the child grows, we talk about, home visitations that we have available. We have a parent educator that comes to their home twice a month, and we're very consistent with that to see what kind of needs the family may have for their child. So we have the play groups also that we have the children that get to socialize, but not just the children, but also the parents. So that's a good way to start building a sort of connection, a positive foundation, and to get the parents to feel welcome coming to the play groups, and then therefore building a relationship where they now will feel comfortable, having their child attend their elementary school or moving to like a preschool setting. So like Ann said, we're in the community. We try to go to as many community resource fairs there are. We make ourselves approachable. I believe that the first impression, body language says a lot. You can be saying something, but if you have that different body language, it's really, that's what takes over, is they look at the body language. So what's very important for us is that before we start telling the parents their expectations as a parent, parent workshops, come to events, volunteer at the school, join the PTO, make sure you come to parent-teacher conferences. It's so important for us to meet them where they are. So, introduce ourselves and ask, how can we help them? How can we make them feel welcome at our school or at the school their child will be going to? And then encourage them to know what's going on in the community with all the resources that they have or that we have available for them. And then building that relationship, encouraging them to, volunteer, join the PTO so they can learn more about their child's school and see how they can help. The language should not be a barrier. At Morris Street School, we have PTO officers that only speak Spanish. We have 2 of them. And then we have one that speaks Portuguese and English, and the treasurer speaks only English. So that is something that other parents can see when they go to the PTO meetings. It's the diversity. And then hopefully they can see that and feel welcome where they now can do more.
Okay, Estella, so in your school, your security person
Yes.
speaks just English as well as your
Correct.
secretary. So what are some of the things that you do, having the office right next, your office right next to the main
Mhm.
office, that you're able to welcome families in and get them feeling comfortable?
Well, I have the privilege of working right there my office is next to the front office or within the front office. And it's just remarkable because we want the parents to feel that they can, they can address the secretary with English if they want to practice their English and see, if they need help, then we definitely jump in, or the secretary will ask, or if I feel like they need a little bit help, I definitely jump in. We want them to feel like they're getting all the information that they need. We don't want them to miss out on any information. So I definitely feel it's very important for them to get the majority, if not most, of all the information that the secretary has for them in their language. Mr. Lieberman, the safety advocate, I mean, he's very welcoming. Yes, he only speaks English, but he'll, he knows that, family, he welcomes them in, and then they go to the front office and the secretary welcomes them. And then she tries, and some parents will say, do you speak English? That's really sometimes the first thing that she hears from the parents. Do you speak English? Or in Spanish they'll ask, habla inglés, habla español. I'm sorry. And the secretary will say, no, I do not speak Spanish, but let me try and see how I can help you. Let me try and see what I can understand. So that is huge for our families, because they don't automatically jump to, let me find someone to help you. She's willing to help them. But if she does see that it's getting a little bit confusing and she's not getting her message across, she definitely reaches out to us, and we're more than welcome to help them.
So Estella, what I'm hearing is that really a lot of the parents that come in have enough English to be able to communicate. So you're not only asking them to speak in English and then having the backup of being able to speak to them in their native language, but you're also helping those parents to feel empowered in their school when they make that initial contact. That is just so great. I want to jump back to some of our mindset changes here that in our FACE building we really worked on, not just for the gentleman who opens the door, Tony, but for anybody that comes to the door. So one of the things that we focus on is that it shouldn't just be that the parent rings the bell and somebody pushes the button. We're very close to the road, so sometimes it's hard to hear. So Tony makes an extra effort to go to the door, welcoming them in whatever language he believes they speak, opening the door for them, and then saying, how can I help you? Because people are arriving at our building with so many different needs and desires for things for their children, he is really that first triage person. And he speaks in the language that they understand, or he gets someone else to help them. And that right there in that 15 seconds really has set the stage for us as a district changing our mindset and helping that front staff to change their mindset too. You'll see on the screen, the last one, we're trying to get away from meet the teacher night to meet the parents night. So if we can have the next slide, that would be great. We often think that we know our families, but we need to take the time to step back for a step and seek to understand. And so that front staff may assume that they know why they're there because of whatever papers in their hands, or that they're coming for one of the reasons here of the different departments in our building. However, what we have found is families identify with schools as a safe, welcoming place away from immigration issues. And so they may be coming to either our FACE Center here or to a school within their neighborhood looking for a myriad of different things. Food resources. In the winter, we had lots of people looking for fuel assistance. So we truly believe here in Danbury that having that front staff be knowledgeable about the resources in the community, as well as all of the different resources that are in the community, and having an understanding on those to be able to hand out, here's a handout on where you can go get fuel assistance or whatever. We play a much bigger role than just being schools. We're here, we're identified by families as that place to go to help. We really have focused on capitalizing on the assets that those parents bring, and through that, it's really just good listening skills to them, never assuming that it's, that they're full of deficits, they're full of assets. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but one of the big things is the last one on that screen that talks about we can't assume that schools should be fixing parents, or that as educators we need to fix parents. Again, we need to be those good listeners. What do you need? Explain that to me. Let me get someone who can help you. Let me bring out somebody else. Oh, you're here because you're concerned about your child's development. All of those different things, parents realize what's going on with their child, so they do seek more services. but we as educators need to seek to understand what they're going through. Our next slide, if we could.
Hey, and there's a question.
Yes.
Would you please repeat the name of the program you use for translation?
Oh, it's CTS Language Systems. And I can post later all of the contact information. It's 62 cents a minute for schools and our central office, and every once in a while we'll use it here too. Well worth. They're wonderful interpreters that you get on the line. There's a coding system that you put in, so I'm able to track who's using it, how long are they using it, and what languages are they using. At our high school, we speak either 48 or 52 different languages. And so it's opened up the communication between our families and our staff in being able to have that intermediate person do the translation. The other thing that we've really worked with our staff, whether it be front-end staff or our staff that is in our schools, is listening and to develop empathy by walking in their shoes. Because we saw a fair amount of families that came that were displaced from the hurricanes in Puerto Rico and the area south, some of the wildfires in California. If you'd never experienced that, you never walked in their shoes. And so really good listening, being empathetic, and helping them get the resources and then following back up with them is really important. Tony, our director of First Impressions here, many times we may not see a parent as he's able to give them the needs that they need, send them in the right direction. So really he's a resource person as well. Okay. The other things that I just wanted to cover was we need to suspend our judgment about families and deconstruct our assumptions. And for here in Danbury, this has really been, as well as in many of the other areas of the country, is a change in our institutional mindsets. And so it's all these things that I'm talking about were part of the training that we did for our secretaries and that we'll be doing for our security people as well, because this is not an innate sense that everyone is born with. And so we all come to our place of work or in our jobs with assumptions. So it's breaking down those assumptions and making it so it's institutional across all schools. Mm-hmm. Estella, do you want to tell me a little bit about maybe one thing that you've done to break down some institutional mindsets at your school?
Well, I believe that every parent has a story. Every family has a story, and they all have different needs. So my assumption that they need A, B, and C may be totally different of what they may need or they may want. So like Ann says, it's really not about fixing or even changing their state of mind or now they're, now these, now you must learn English and now you must do 1, 2, and 3, but it's really about meeting them where they are and see how we can empower them. I always tell the parents, whether it's a PTO, a workshop, a resource fair, knowledge is power. It's so important for them to know where they who offers what resources are there in our community. But while I'm saying that, the resources that we have in our community or in your community can be quite overwhelming for someone that just arrived to your town or to the school or to your city. So what I have is I have binders, and while it's it's almost seems quite an overtaken, but I have 3 binders, and they're at their disposal to, when they come in, I say, feel free to just take a look at the binder, because you may see something there that you may not even think about. And then if you have additional questions, let's get those answers. I do not have all the answers, but we can certainly help them make those phone calls. So, a binder for emergency hotlines or phone calls, resources for sports. A lot of our families, they want to know what's out there. What can their child do? Where can they participate? Who do they call for T-ball? Who do they call for? If their child wants to dance. I mean, like I said, a lot of times we don't want to make that assumption that they need this. They may be looking for something totally different. And while we are rich with a lot of resources, again, it could be quite overwhelming. But just having it in one big, nice, fat binder, they can just flip through and see what they may need.
And I also think that when families come into school, having a comfortable place, and I know Estella, your office right there off the central office or off the main office has some really comfortable chairs. It has toys for children to play. The same thing here in our schools throughout Danbury. We've tried to make a place where the principal or the front end staff and the secretary aren't always facing the family from behind a desk, but rather can sit in chairs and talk to one another. Often when I'm called out by Tony to talk to a family, I sit next to them. I don't bring them back to the more formal office setting unless it's really needed because of confidentiality, but sometimes just sitting close to them, sharing my experiences with them, listening to what their experiences are, getting what their narrative is really what helps families feel welcome in our schools. If we can go to the next slide. And so one of the mindsets is, and it goes along with what was on the other slide, is schools know families' best narratives and what they should do. And families, as Estella said, really know their own narrative. And so those are the things that we need to listen to. Schools in America are very, very traditional schools using a school-centered approach. Here in Danbury, we spend a lot of time out with our families in the community. For instance, today our play group is out at one of the local parks. I know that Estella has hers out in the community, and that draws other families in. They see what's going on in the play group, and they're like, wow, I want to be part of that. And so Tony at the front desk is really well versed in that. When families come in, he says, do you know about, I see you have a younger child, do you know about our play group? So the importance of that first contact, that first person that families come to and first see is just so very important. And it's time that is well worth spent with training and making sure that they know the community. So when we hire, we try to hire someone very familiar with Danbury, or we do a really quick catch up with them. The next one there is the long-standing history of school community strategies reads like an edict. We need to rather meet them on their own turf and open up unlimited, I'm sorry, that has a typo in it, open up unlimited accessibility. And that means not so much your front end staff going to things, though many times secretaries will stay and go to the PTA meeting or PTO meeting and go to the family picnic. But many times our staff here is called out to go to other events within the community. So it's being part of that, where they then feel after they've come to your school or to your building that then you're able to go out to where they are and they're able to have another form of accessibility. And then lastly is we often marginalize our parents, but really full partnerships, as Judy said in the beginning, is having an understanding of what is that balance with families and how do we approach families, how do we work with families so that they feel included in everything that we do. Any other thoughts, Estella, that you do in your school?
No, I definitely agree. This is a huge investment for us to connect with our families. And like you said, first impressions, those first 10, 15 seconds, very important. Body language is huge.
Getting down on their level, sitting with them, being willing to spend time. That's what it's about, time and knowledge, and seek to understand. Judy?
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Whoops, trying to advance the slide here. It's not advancing. What I was going to say as I was listening is that I had the opportunity to experience some of the family friendliness firsthand when I came out to visit the FACE Center. And for those of you who don't know or are new to that acronym, in many places that stands for Family and Community Engagement, shortened to FACE, and that's what Danbury has called their center that Anne was describing. That's really the home base for so much that happens in Danbury Public Schools. And I had the opportunity to go visit, and of course, you know, downtown Danbury, busy area, trying to find a place to park. Well, this wonderful gentleman was out in the parking lot, and he just directed me right into this beautiful space. You know, I just thought like I was royalty arriving, the way that this gentleman treated me. And so I walked into the building just, you know, feeling very special. And I asked Anne, who is that person? She said, oh, that is our safety advocate. And so I just have to tell you, he didn't know who I was. He didn't know why I was there or who I was going to see, but I just felt treated with respect and truly welcome to be there. And that notion that we're glad you're here definitely came across. So I just wanted to say I had a chance to see it in action. And if anybody listening is ever interested in how you might put together a family and community engagement center, bring all these resources together, I highly recommend a visit to Danbury to meet Anne and Estella and the other wonderful people that make that center very lively and really welcoming to a wide range of people that are interacting with Danbury Public Schools. But I wanted to ask a question. You mentioned the idea, and we talked earlier about the folks who are doing these roles are really busy, and oftentimes they are tied down to their office, tied down to the building. They need to be there. And how do you organize training for folks? Just in a real basic way, how do you get them together, or do you individualize it school by school, or how do you roll out training?
So we've done it a couple different ways. Schools have PD days, professional development days, and so our district values that our paraprofessionals and secretaries and other support staff also receive PD. And so we were able to bring in the secretaries to our central registration room, which is a big room. We moved around some furniture. And so there was two ideas behind that. One, they could see where all this registration was taking place, where parents were first going. And like you said, Judy, to feel some of that warmth that the center gives families. And they were here for about 2 hours. We treated them very special. Our secretaries are special. We fed them a nice breakfast, which made them feel good about their roles. Often our support staff don't always feel good about their roles, and they need to be celebrated just like teachers and our administrative staff is. And then there was a few that said, I just need a little bit more help in my setting. Can you come out? Can you look at the way it looks? Is my desk cluttered? Do I have a chair where a family can come and sit in? Could you send out some more books so that I can make a book center for my families when they come and visit? So it was things like that, both in the group, a large group during a PD day, as well as those smaller visits. And I'm in and out of the schools all the time. And so though I'm very careful in how I approach things with welcoming schools, I have a great relationship with our principals. And so they're looking to us here for feedback on how they can do things better, because they see that it is working.
That's a great point. And how do you work with principals to support their front office and their safety staff? So it seems like it's really important for them all to be on the same page, because of course those staff are responsive to the principal. So this needs to be a shared mission.
Correct. We have been trying to weave all of the premises around family partnerships into everything that we do. Our district has moved from administrative meetings, long meetings with principals and other OTs, PTs, special ed, PPS staff, to a model of administrative learning sessions for 2 hours once a month. And so we have been able to link pieces of that family school partnership into many things that we are doing. We also recognize that many of the principals are doing absolutely wonderful things in their schools. And so we capitalized on that. And just a lot of sharing of things that one school does that another school might do, and giving the time for principals to be able to really look at their schools with a critical eye to how they're gaining families' trust and getting families on board, and how they're welcoming them at their individual schools.
And so I was wondering the other side of it too, about parents' expectations. And I know both you and Estella work with parents who have little ones. And so there is a transition then when you move into the more formal setting and your kids start going up through the grades, of the parents' understanding of how schools work and how to get things done here.
That's quite an opportunity when for us and for the parents as well, you know, that that's when they start, you know, they know that they're going to get buzzed in. They know that, you know, they'll get the good morning from the secretary, and then they start to get to know the safety advocate. Then they start learning, both the parents and the child, you know, some of the school rules, you know, and then they get familiarized with possibly other activities, other events that can be in, whether it's FACE or whether it's in other play groups within the Denver Public Schools. What other choices do they have? I mean, there's school readiness programs. So in them coming to the play groups, it's so important. That's like the first step of learning about the schools, the first step about learning about staff, about school rules and policies, the first step about what's, you know, what is available through the schools. Where do they go to register their child? When is orientation? So it's a wealth of information, especially for those young families with young children.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's learning a whole new world.
Absolutely.
So what other thoughts would you have for getting started? Let's say there's a school that hasn't yet really brought their front office and safety staff into the work of school-family partnerships. What would you recommend as some first steps?
I think having a discussion about some of their attitudes and assumptions around the families that come in. Also looking at the actual space of where families are coming in, how they greet them. I know, and I think I said it earlier, instead of just pushing the button and saying, come on in, or what do you want, actually going and opening the door. So it doesn't happen overnight. It does take time. It's finding the right person. So I think it really starts in how you interview for that front staff, and your expectations as the principal or superintendent of the expectations of what you want out of that staff. But for staff that's been there for years, that could be a slightly tougher challenge to change some of those mindsets. But it's talking about it. It might be a whole school discussion that you bring in your secretary, your front end staff, your safety officer, to really have that deep dive discussion about how to make your schools more friendlier. I wouldn't do it individually unless it was something that a principal felt very strongly that she or he had asked to change the disposition of the way the person was dealing with the public when they first come to the door. And if it's not happening after several attempts, then probably a more direct discussion is validated. However, doing it in a whole group, so that the school as a group moves towards having a more inclusive environment is important.
This can also be a brief discussion during their staff meeting. It doesn't have to be the whole time of a staff meeting, but it can certainly take maybe 10, 15 minutes. And just, maybe some key points, some key ideas on how they can, they can incorporate a lot of this, to get, to make parents feel welcoming. So it could be done that way, like a brief, 15, 20 minutes during their staff meeting could certainly help.
I love what you all have done, and again, thank you so much for being a resource and also being so welcoming to others to go visit you and see your work in action. And one of the big takeaways I have is that so many of the principles that we use in building partnerships with families apply to building partnerships with our other staff. The idea of a two-way conversation, and seek to listen and seek to understand the reality of their position and what they're dealing with. And in the end, we really are there for the same purpose. I mean, I think these jobs in schools are demanding. They are often, as we said earlier in the research, it's clear often the pay is fairly low. And folks are in these jobs, we all want to see kids succeed. That really is the bottom line for schools, for families, for all of us. And I think you've brought us back to that idea of how to build the relationships with all the folks in our school using the good principles of listening, of seeking to understand, finding the common ground, and building on assets. So it really does, it completes the circle.
It does.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us. We're going to archive this webinar. I know there were lots of people that were interested that weren't able to make it today, and so we'll put that up on the Friday Cafe website. We have some resources that we have in one of the slides. And then we're going to have the next session, the last in our session of 4 for this spring on high impact family engagement. That's going to be on June 8th, again from 10 to 11. And in that session, we're going to be talking about linking to learning and bringing families closer to the learning process, what's going on in the classroom, what's the curriculum. We'll talk about maybe how kids are assessed. And then we're also going to launch a summer book club, and we will reveal the book and talk more about that in our next session. The website that we archive this work on is the Friday Cafe website. That's at fridaycafe.org. That's also the site of Connecticut's professional learning community for school family partnerships. We have monthly sessions in person at interesting places. We go to community venues that spark creativity all over the state. Those are once a month on a Friday from 8:30 to 10:30, and we've just put together our dates for next school year, for the 18-19 school year. And so if you go on the Friday Cafe website, you can see the dates there. And then every month we announce the topic and we announce the location. So I want to say thank you for joining us. Please do feel free to contact me, Judy Carson, or Ann Mead and Estella Camacho in Danbury. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.